We have 11 willow logs, 10 different species of mushrooms, and absolutely no idea if this is going to work. Hey there, I'm Roxy, and today we're going to try to inoculate these willow logs with some mushroom mycelium. Between the tree potentially waking up from dormancy and some of our mycelium looking a bit questionable, this is a total trial run. If we get it right, we'll have gourmet mushrooms for years. If not, well, we'll have an expensive pile of firewood logs. We got them from a neighbor about 3 weeks ago when he cut down his willow tree. We stacked them here just to make sure they have some airflow between them and they're not going to be colonized with other fungus species. We want to restack them the same way, so I'm going to number them and then take them upstairs and drill them. There are a few best practices for this to work. First off, the wood should be cut when the tree isn't leafing, so that would be any time from late autumn to early spring, before the buds start to grow. This is the period when the tree is packed with stored sugar, perfect fuel for the mycelium to eat once the tree's natural defenses drop. In our case, these were cut at the beginning of March while the tree was still dormant. There were no signs of buds trying to grow, so fingers crossed it wasn't too late. Then another best practice is to inoculate the logs between 2 to 4 weeks after the wood is cut. Living trees have a natural defense mechanism against being eaten away by fungi, so it's recommended to wait until the antifungal compounds weaken. But not too long, or you run the risk of having random wild fungi moving in first. And at that point, it's too late. Your chosen species will just end up competing for resources, which greatly diminishes your chances of a successful harvest of the mushroom you specifically want to grow. And we specifically want to grow any of these. These white, fluffy, cotton-like threads covering the dowels and grains are the mycelium. Think of it as the mushroom's root system, the actual organism that lives hidden away, feeding on organic matter. The classic mushrooms we're used to seeing are in fact the fruiting bodies of such mycelium. It's like the apple to a tree, but in this case, the tree grows silently underground or inside wood. We're working with spawn from 2 different sources, including several species and 2 bags of grain spawn alongside the traditional dowels. This gives us a wider trial and error space to see which ones are truly beginner-friendly if you want to try this yourself. Most of these are different types of oyster mushrooms, which are notorious for being aggressive colonizers. But we've also got shiitake and lion's mane. Right, let's get to work. We've wrapped some tape around the drill bit as a depth gauge. You want the hole to be just a tiny bit deeper than the dowel to leave a small air chamber where the mycelium can begin to grow. We'll start by drilling our first log. We're using a ruler to measure out the recommended diamond pattern. The holes should be spaced 10 to 15 centimeters apart along the length of the log. That's around 4 to 6 inches. The next row should be offset by 5 centimeters, or 2 inches, to create that diamond shape mentioned in the industry guides. We're only using 1 species per log. If you combine 2, they'll just fight for territory and you'll end up with a weaker yield, or nothing at all. I have my notes here with the species and which log they should go into, and I'll be numbering everything to keep track of what goes where. Before we touch the spawn, we have to talk about sanitization. To minimize the risk of molds ruining a year-long project, the standard practice is to sanitize your hands and tools. We're using isopropyl alcohol, reapplying it to our hands, the hammer, and drill between every single log, and before opening each new bag of mycelium. This one we're starting with is the Princess Pearl oyster. The dowel should be hammered in all the way. I was actually worried that the tight fit might scrape the mycelium off the sides of the dowel, but apparently even a tiny amount is enough for it to start regrowing. Plus, the mycelium on the bottom of the dowel stays mostly unscraped and comfy inside that small air chamber we left, so it can begin to regrow from there. Also, you'd think the drill holes would be easy to spot, but we actually missed a few. So make sure to do a final pass so you don't leave any holes unplugged. Once the plugs are in, the standard move is to seal them with beeswax, so we're melting a small block to cover each dowel. This locks the moisture inside and protects the mycelium from pests that might want to snack on it. We prefer beeswax over candle wax because it's a natural product, it's durable, stays flexible, and won't crumble as easily as paraffin. Now let's take a look at two different inoculation methods using the same species, lion's mane. First, we're using the lion's mane dowels on this thinner log, which is log number 6. I chose a smaller log because the mycelium on these specific dowels looked a bit weak. My bet is that giving the fungus less volume to colonize will give it a better chance of taking hold before it runs out of energy. We noticed that some of the dowels were so well hydrated or even partially broken down by the mycelium that they actually crushed when hammered. Since I can't pull them back out, I'll just make sure to cover them with extra wax to keep them sealed. And this is what the log looks like when it's sealed and done. For our thickest log, log number 1, we're switching to the lion's mane grain spawn. Since this log has so much more wood to colonize, I wanted to use the most nutrient-dense fuel possible. Grain spawn is a bit less common for logs because the grain can attract contaminants and pests, but it provides a much faster jumpstart than dowels. And my guess is that is what a massive log like this needs to stay ahead of any wild competitors. Usually, there's a special tool for inserting grain spawn, but since this is just a fun trial run, we're making do with disinfected tweezers. To give it the best start, I'm putting a few grains into every hole. For added protection, I'm plugging the holes with plain, non-mycelium dowels hammered in only halfway, since the grain takes up some extra space. This is a total trial and error situation, but by using the same fungus on two different supports and log sizes, I think we've created a decent experiment for comparison. It'll be an interesting race to see which one fruits first. It's been about a month since the inoculation, and the logs are already starting to look a bit different. The willow bark has shifted from that initial fresh brown to a weathered gray, and the logs are even popping out new buds. This is actually normal for willow. It means the wood still contains nutrient-rich sap for the mycelium to feed on, but we'll have to rub these off so they don't use up the nutrients the mushrooms need. I've finally gotten around to making labels to keep this project organized. Good thing I still have my notes on which log has what mushroom. Because not everything was thoroughly documented that day, and because I hate wasting good material, we have a little bonus experiment. We were left with several large bags of unused mycelium, so we decided to try a pot culture method. We mixed the leftover spawn with some fresh willow shavings from our drilling and topped them with a layer of plain potting mix. But in the chaos of the cleanup, I got a bit distracted. I removed the labeled bags sitting on each pot before marking them. So we now have 3 mystery mushroom pots. By process of elimination, they should be elm oyster, aspen oyster, and phoenix oyster, 1 in each pot, but we don't know for sure which is which until they fruit. If you're curious to see what pops out of those mystery pots, or if this whole log experiment actually works, I'd love to have you along for the ride. I'll be posting updates on every milestone, from the first signs of growth to the harvest. Now begins the hardest part of mushroom farming, the waiting game. Depending on the type of species and the weather, it could take anywhere from 6 to 18 months for the mycelium to fully run through these logs. Our main job now is moisture control. Since the logs are looking a bit dry and it hasn't rained much, I'll be giving them a deep soak with the hose once a week. The goal is to keep the internal wood damp while allowing the bark to dry out occasionally so we don't invite unwanted mold on the outside. This is a total trial run for us, and honestly, if even half of these fruit, I'll consider it a massive success. Let me know in the comments which species you think will fruit first. My bet is still on the Princess Pearl. Thank you so much for following along on this experiment. I can't wait to show you what happens next. See you soon.